Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Swapology. Today we're doing something a little bit different. As you know, I've got a 2009 Infiniti M35 Sport model as a daily driver, and I've done a couple minor mods to that car, being some upgraded brakes, lowering springs, and wheels and tires. And I like to take the car, spirited driving. We took it down to the Tail of the Dragon recently, and I do some local autocrosses with the car. And one of the things the car is severely lacking is a sporty seat. So today I'm going to be swapping seats into that car. Now, I'm not just going to buy any aftermarket seat to put into that car, because some of the things I really love about the car are the creature comforts and accessories that it has. So the fact that the car has factory power, heated, and cooled seats is something I want to retain. So there's not a lot of aftermarket seats that have those functions in them. They do exist, and the ones that do exist are very expensive. And I'm trying to keep some kind of a budget with my own cars here. And so what I started doing was looking at other Nissan and Infiniti vehicles that were sportier cars that had heated and cooled seats. So actually the first car I looked at was a Nissan GTR, and turns out does not have cooled seats, only has heated seats. I would have thought that model would have had cooled seats too, but hey, Nissan I'm sure was trying to cut weight wherever they could out of that car, and that's why they don't have it. So then I started looking at like the Infiniti G37. It's similar year to the M35, so the electronics should be similar or compatible, and it's a sportier car. And I looked at those seats, and while they are a little bit sportier than a factory M seat, they're not really that sporty of a seat at all, even though they are heated and cooled. So then I started looking at the Nissan 370Z. And the 370Z, again, has heated seats, but not cooled seats. So then I was kind of a little bummed. I kind of gave up on the project for a little while. And then recently, my wife had expressed some interest in maybe getting a 370Z convertible. She loves convertibles. So I just started, browsing eBay and Craigslist just to see what they sell for to satisfy my curiosity. And while I was looking through those pictures, I noticed that on a 370Z convertible, there was a knob on the center console for heated and cooled seats, exactly like my M has. So it turns out the convertibles have climate-controlled seats. The hardtops only have heated seats. I guess that's because when you're driving top down, maybe if you park the car with the top down, the leather on the seat gets really hot. You want a cooled seat to cool you off, or it's just hot out and the cooled seat makes driving nicer, whatever. Doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is the seats exist, and they have heated and cooled seats. The 370Zs were out in 2009, just like my M is, so the electronics generationally should be similar. So the next step I started doing was looking at the factory wiring diagrams for both cars to compare how the 370Z seats are wired and controlled to the M seats. Now, while they're both power seats and they're both heated and cooled, there are still a lot of differences between the cars. And Infiniti, like the M, has what's called an automatic drive positioner control unit. And what that computer does is store the position of the seat and the mirrors, so when two different drivers get in the car, they can push a button and the seat and mirrors move to that driver's position. That's not something that Nissan put in the 370Zs. That's more of a high-end option than the target market for a 370Z. So I started comparing how that system works and how I could potentially modify the 370Z seat to be compatible with that system so that I still retain the memory function for the seat position. So after doing some research, it looks like the seat motors actually have sensors inside of them that detect the position on the Infiniti seats. So if I want to retain that functionality, I'm going to have to actually swap motors between seats. I'm going to see if that can be done. Again, the cars are similar generationally. The motors might actually mount the same. I don't know yet. Haven't got it in there, but I'm going to give it a shot. I am going to have to move that automatic drive positioner computer from the Infiniti seat into the 370Z seat and rewire the switches and controls so that the Nissan switches will communicate with the automatic drive positioner control unit instead of the Infiniti switches. Seems a little confusing, seems like a lot of stuff going on. It's like, this is just swapping seats. This should be easy. But this is what we have to deal with when we're dealing with more modern vehicles that have a lot more creature comforts, and when you want to retain those things. It's a big thing at LOJ. I like to do swaps, whether it's an engine swap or just a seat swap, but have things still work the way they're supposed to in the car. I don't want to give up creature comforts just because I want to swap a seat or an engine in a vehicle. All right, so at this point, oh boy, what a mess. I took a lot of the driver's seat apart. This is obviously the Infiniti seat. And the reason we took a lot of this apart is actually you can't get to a bunch of the electrical components inside the seat unless you take the cushion out, because there's nuts that go on the top of here, which lifts up this tray and gives you access inside the seat for getting to all the connectors and actually getting this automatic drive positioner control unit out of the seat. It's bolted in from the top, not the bottom, which makes it really tricky to try to get out of there. Originally, I compared the rails on the bottom of the seats, and believe it or not, the rails are actually wider apart on the 370 than the M35 by about a ½ inch, the rails themselves. And then you can see this mount comes off and kind of swings out, which makes the mounting points even further apart, though the angles are very similar and the locations are very similar. So I was doing some exploratory surgery over here, trying to figure out if I could take the entire bottom rail actuator assembly out of this seat and put it right into the 370Z seat. But the way it's designed, that's going to be way more challenging than it's worth. Unfortunately, I had talked earlier about seat positions and memory. The sensor for the seat position front to back is actually built into the end of the rail here. And I'm going to pop this apart and try to see if maybe it can get grafted into the end of the rail on the 370Z seat, because it actually, the rail, the way it's designed, looks very similar. So that there might be some hope there. And I still haven't figured out where the sensor is for the tilting position. I have a feeling I got to take the seat back apart a bit for that. But the plan right now is to try to pull the harness out of the M35 seat and graft it into the 370Z seat so that the 370Z switches connect where the M switches would have connected, the 370Z motors connect where the M motors would have connected, and I can make some kind of bracket for holding this control unit up under the seat here. The heat switches and cooling switches, again, the motors, the heater elements, the blower motors for the cooling will connect into the M harness where they would have. So that way, when I put this seat into the car, the M harness will plug back into the car just like it did from the factory. The only changes are on the seat side, not on the car side. And then I'm going to cut all 4 of these off. Actually, you can just drill out these rivets and then take some close measurements, as close as I can, off of these and graft the brackets from the M seat onto the 370Z seat. So that's the plan right now. Again, like I said in the beginning, the plan's going to change as we go because I'm learning things as I go. But that's where I'm at right now, and we will keep marching forward. All right, so at this point, I have successfully taken all of the electrical wiring, the harness out of the M35 seat and grafted it into the 370Z seat. I did it in such a way so that the 2 factory connectors that would have connected the M seat to the car now connect the Z seat to the car. And it actually ended up being a lot easier than I had originally thought once I figured out what could be kept and what didn't need to be kept. So the climate control seat module, CCSM, no surprise there, on both cars have the exact same wires going in and out of them. There's basically a power and a ground. There's 2 lights that illuminate the heat or cooled indicators on the switch. And then there are 3 more wires that are required to actually tell this module what level of cooling and what level of heating, and that's like a variable resistor between one common pin and the other 2 pins, depending one's heat, one's cool. So those 7 wires were pretty easy to connect. It's the exact same connections in both cars. It was just a matter of cutting off the 370Z connector and making those 7 wires connect to the correct spot on the M35 connector. You can see here, zip tied in place is the seat control unit. That is to make all of the body control module stuff happy in the M just by detecting its presence there, but it's really just dummy at this point to make the car happy. None of the M wires are actually connected to any of the Z motors at all, because the way the M works is the switches talk to this box, and then this box has outputs to the motors. But the way the 370Z seat works is the switches go directly through. There's 6 wires coming out of the switch, power and ground going in, then 4 wires coming out, 2 for tilt, 2 for forward and backward motion. So all you have to do is give this black and red wire power and ground, and then the seat will work. So what I did was just tapped into the main power and ground wires that go to this box and run those to that switch. So airbag connector is actually exactly the same in both cars, so that plugged right in. And I did put the seat in the car, sat it in place, plugged it all in, turned the car on, verified that the cooling function works. I think the heating function works. It's like 80 something degrees today, so it's kind of hard to say for certain. I'll find out this winter, but I'm confident if the cooling is working, the heating should be working as well. And no airbag lights with the airbag plugged in, so that's nice and happy. And now I'm in the process of actually changing the brackets over. So like I had said earlier, the spacing between the bolts is different on the 370Z seat and the M seat. So what I actually did was drilled out the rivets on the factory M brackets, and then the brackets just come off. And once you've got the brackets off the rails are the same length and they're both flat. They're slightly further apart on the 370Z, like a ½ inch, 10 millimeters, something like that. So basically all I need to do is once I get these brackets cut off the M seat and I go to weld these on, they just won't be centered. They'll be slightly offset to one side so that the spacing between the bolt holes matches. I took measurements of what the orientation was between all of them on the M seat before I took them off, and I will make sure those measurements match once they're on the Z seat. Then the Z seat will bolt straight into the car, just like the factory seat did, and we will be good to go. And then I just get to do it all over again for the passenger seat. But that'll be a lot easier because the passenger seat doesn't have any of this smart stuff in it. It's just like a factory Z seat, so it'll be a lot easier. But on to more work. All right, guys, so we are wrapping up today's work on the M35 with this seat swap. We've installed a 370Z driver's side seat into my M35 today. Did not get to the passenger side seat. Turned out to be a lot more work than I expected, as these things generally are. Plus, had some other projects going on in the shop today that I had to keep tag teaming back and forth on. So didn't get to spend the entire day working on it, but we did get the driver's seat done completely and achieved all of the goals I had for the seat other than the memory function, which just wasn't possible because the seat position sensors in the M35 are integrated into the sliding rails themselves, so they can't be transferred to the 370Z seats. So other than not having memory for the seat position, the seat does all the things that the factory seat does. It still power moves forward and backwards, power tilts the back of the seat. The 370Zs have manual adjustment knobs to raise and lower the seat base, but that's okay. And the seat controls, all the factory controls that are on the 370Z seat still function exactly as they should. The seat heater works and the seat cooler works. The seats fit awesome. I think that the seat looks great in the car. I can't wait to get the passenger seat done. The passenger seat should be a whole heck of a lot easier than the driver's seat to do, because the passenger seat in an M doesn't have any memory functions to begin with. So there's no seat position control unit to worry about when it comes to wiring. The wiring is very, very similar to the 370Z seat, just the way it is. Now, in order to get the seat to fit, what I ended up having to do was install 1.5 inch square tubing between the 370Z rails and the brackets that I cut off of the M35 seat. So the M35 seat, the rails have 4 brackets on them, 2 front, 2 rear. The rails are just flat, straight adjusters, and those brackets go down and meet the chassis of the car. So what I did was I cut the 4 brackets off of the M35 seat, then I cut the 4 brackets off of the 370Z seat, went to install the M35 brackets directly onto the 370Z rails and realized there was going to be a problem because the 370Z is such a low profile seat in the car. The 370Z car has a recess in the floor for the seat bottom cushion cooler blower to recess down into. If I had installed the brackets from the M straight onto the rails, that blower would have hung down so low that it would have hit the floor of the M before the seat rails actually hit their mounting points. So I got some 1.5 inch square spare stock tubing from our local hardware store. Unfortunately, they only had tubing that had holes drilled in the walls, but it's not the end of the world. It's weight reduction, right? It'll work fine. And what I did was I cut 4 short pieces of that to act as spacers between the rails and the brackets to lower the brackets down to make the clearance required for that blower motor in the seat cooler. And it really, honestly, it worked out fine. You don't see the spacers when the seat's installed at all because all the plastic trim still covers it up. The seat is still about 2 inches lower than the factory seat, which is great because I had some helmet clearance issues in the car during autocrossing. That won't be an issue now. I'm a 6 foot tall guy, but I'm kind of tall in the torso, so headroom's always an issue for me in a car, especially since I don't like to keep the seat really reclined. I like more of a vertical seating position. It's great. It's such an improvement over the factory M seat. I love it. I can't wait to get the passenger seat done just to make the look complete, and it'll match both sides, but it's perfect. And looking in the car, if you didn't know better, you would just think it's a factory seat in the car. The black leather of the 370Z matches the black leather of the M. There's no color mismatch there. Can't wait to go to the next autocross with this thing with the new seat in it. I actually have a set of Coney shocks that I had set up for it as well too. I'm looking forward to getting those installed. We'll do another video on that later. Should complement the iBox springs that are on it right now already. But I hope you enjoyed this video. This is kind of just a mashup of some footage I took today. I didn't have somebody to follow me around with the camera today, so it was just me doing what I could and piecing some stuff together for you. But thanks so much for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell for these videos. Thanks so much. God bless. Take care.